morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the World Federation of Hemophilia Global VWD Call to Action, the world's response. My name is Dawn Rotellini, and I'm a WFH board member and the chair of the Women with Inherited Bleeding Disorders Committee. And it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you all and also to be the moderator for this. I just want to give a huge shout out to WFH for hosting this important topic and for really investing and focusing in on von Willebrand disease. And a special thanks to Alia Loney and Zoe Jackson for their work on this important topic and making sure that we can all be together and coordinating all of our efforts. Next slide, please. So I just am super excited with our full panel today. We have so much to cover in 1 hour and 15 minutes. Here are the list of your speakers. I want to thank all of our speakers for their time and effort in preparing for this presentation. Dr. Magdy El Ekiaby, Luisa Durante, Chedia Aroua from Tunisia, Cassie Osejo from Panama, and Louise Ellwood from South Africa are your speakers today. Next slide. So I'll just go over the agenda quickly so we can dive into the content. First, thank you, Dr. Magdy, for giving us the overview of von Willebrand disease to really kick us off so that we're all on the same page. And then Luisa is going to give us really the background. What is the global call to action and how can you get involved at your NMO level? And then it's really exciting to be able to hear from 4 different NMOs to share their unique experiences. These NMOs have all signed on to the global call to action, and this is how they interpreted that work of prioritizing it. And then this is actually a first ever, I think, maybe, to have the breakout groups where we can all break into sessions and actually talk to each other, discuss our ideas, and get input from each other about how we can take maybe the first step in making this a priority for your NMO. Then we'll go into Q&A, and at the very end, you'll see how you can sign on to the call to action. Next slide, please. So one really key thing is that we will not be, sorry, I just realized, oh, okay. Sorry about that. I thought my video was supposed to be on. We will not be talking about COVID-19 today. So it's just an important aspect. Certainly there are opportunities for you to ask questions, but this session today is really not going to be about COVID-19, but rather the VWD call to action. So here is the place you can go to get more information from WFH, which is expert information on COVID-19 communications. Next slide, please. And webinar information. So today's webinar is being recorded and it is being offered in English. However, the breakout groups will be in 5 languages: English, French, Spanish, Arabic, and Russian. And the webinar recording will be on the e-learning platform. I'm really proud of WFH for making this step of making it beyond the 3 sort of official languages, which is English, French, and Spanish, and adding to the resources. It's an investment to add Arabic and Russian. And so I'm really proud of the staff for really pushing this and doing this. Also a note about the chat. You can type your questions in one of those 5 languages. We have a team of wonderful volunteers that are helping us translate those questions into English for the presenters. And so you may type your questions into English, French, Spanish, Arabic, or Russian. And then we will have a Q&A at the very end. And if time allows, hopefully we'll have time for more questions, but we really have a packed agenda. Next slide, please. So I talked about the recording of the webinar. It will be available on the e-learning platform, and the link is below. Next slide, please. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Magdy. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Dawn, for your nice introduction into this important webinar And many thanks to Alea and Luisa for taking the time and the effort to organize this program about von Willebrand disease. Next, please. So I was asked to talk briefly on von Willebrand disease and to realize what is the disease or why von Willebrand disease happens. We need to understand what is the function of what is called the von Willebrand factor, which is a large protein circulating in our blood and is responsible for control of bleeding if it happens. So it has a function to bridge the platelets, which are responsible to close any breach in the blood vessel to the blood vessel and between themselves. And in addition, it holds the factor VIII, thereby protecting it from degradation. So as you can see, this protein has several roles, and based on this, its presentations may be different between one person to the other. Next, please. So in a nutshell, von Willebrand disease is the result of one of two things: either reduction in the amount of the production of the von Willebrand factor, or defect in its function, and so the disease happens. Next, please. First time to describe this disease was done by an internist in Finland, and his name was Erik von Willebrand, and that's why the disease had this name, and this was in 1926. Next, please. What about the prevalence of the disease? Normally, this disease is the most prevalent disease among the inherited bleeding disorders. And in some literature, they describe its prevalence as 1 in 100. But actually, for those who are presenting with the bleeding symptoms due to the disease, we may say that the prevalence can be 1 in 10,000. So it should be, I mean, the number identified parallel to the number of patients with hemophilia. But if we look to the global survey in 2018, we find that only 78,000 persons were diagnosed in comparison to the patients with hemophilia, which is around 210,000. And so there is a huge gap in identifying this disease and trying to reach to these patients in order to take care of them. And that's very important out of this webinar, is to realize this, and that all NMOs will work with the healthcare providers in their respective areas, trying to raise awareness about this disease. Next, please. So one of the things is that we need to understand, next, because this slide has like next for 2 times, yes please, has a different patterns of inheritance. So type 1 and all types are inherited as autosomal dominant. This means in hemophilia, it is sex-linked, but in von Willebrand, it is related to the body chromosomes, not to the sex chromosomes. And in hemophilia, it is a recessive, and here it is dominant. So we expect, even if one father or one parent is carrying the disease, that he can pass this disease to his son or to his daughter, and that it affects both males and females. The exception from the dominant inheritance is type 3 and type 2N. These are inherited as autosomal recessive. And this is very important to understand in order to get the family history and how to diagnose the disease. Next, please. The disease has different presentations. In the mild or moderate form, it is mainly mucocutaneous bleeding, meaning bleeding from the nose, from the mouth, heavy menstrual bleeding for the ladies. The severe form, which is type 3, which is complete deficiency, because it's also a very low level of factor VIII, we may see musculoskeletal bleeding. Next, please. And for the diagnosis, we need a very specialized lab. Important issues about basic needs for management, we need primary multidisciplinary team. We need a knowledgeable hematologist, nurses, highly qualified lab capable of performing specialized von Willebrand disease diagnostic tests obstetricians for the ladies who have heavy bleedings and other needs. And we have some treatment products that are basically used, DDAVP, antifibrinolytics, and deconcentrates. Very important that the new guidelines will be issued soon due to the work of American Society of Hematology, National Hemophilia Foundation, International Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis, and the World Federation of Hemophilia. The importance of these guidelines is that it will inform the authorities, the healthcare providers, and the patients about the important points to manage this disease and how can funders support this. Next, please. And with this, I thank you very much for giving me this chance.
Thank you so much. I was wondering how you were going to do that in 5 minutes. You did an outstanding job. Thank you for the excellent overview of von Willebrand disease. Next up is Luisa Durante, the Global VWD Call to Action expert. Luisa?
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's really great to be with you today. I think what Dr. Magdy said is a really good segue when he talked about the guidelines, about why it's so important in the VWD Global Call to Action, and really what we're trying to achieve in the WFH and trying to have more recognition, better care and treatment for patients living worldwide with von Willebrand disease. So it's really a great pleasure to be with you today. Thank you all for joining in. It's a pretty exciting session. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So what is the VWD Global Call to Action? For some of you, it's the first time you're probably going to actually have heard of the Global VWD Call to Action. The VWD Call to Action was born out of a need to talk more about von Willebrand disease, to have it more recognized, to put it actually as a priority, as a bleeding disorder within the actual community itself, and really to be able to provide more awareness, more orientation guidance, and to look at how can we put VWD, how can we talk about it more and have it be more at the forefront when we're talking about care and treatment overall. The call to action really is a recognition of what VWD is, of the realities of patients living with VWD in all areas of the world, and really focuses on key priority areas that you can see here, such as improving diagnosis, really trying to break the myths about VWD. There's a lot of them. We all have different ideas about what VWD is. There's a lot of misconceptions. Is it hemophilia? It's not hemophilia. It's a different type of bleeding disorder. So what is it and how is it different? What are the realities of men and women who have von Willebrand disease? How does it manifest? How do we encourage advocacy and more leadership in terms of the patient organizations? And the guidelines are critical. So the guidelines really are, what are the standards of care in terms of clinical management for patients living with VWD? How do we encourage our national member organizations to do more work on VWD? How do you integrate that? What does outreach look like? How do you advocate actually for better care? These are all things that comprise what the VWD Global Call to Action is. And I always sum it up in really one sentence in a lot of ways. When I think about the call to action, it's really an act of solidarity with all patients living with VWD worldwide. We know that there's a lot of different realities depending on where you live, but when it comes to care and treatment, it really needs to be equal for everybody. And it's the same with patients living with VWD, and this is something we try to achieve, and we try to create more awareness about this through the VWD Global Call to Action. So here you see the list of key priorities. You can also see them on our website, but really a lot of this is about solidarity, empowerment, advocating for better care, making sure that healthcare professionals do have the proper training and the clinical management of being able to provide that care and treatment to patients everywhere. Next slide, please. So this gives a little bit more information about what it is. You know, we know that VWD is the most common bleeding disorder. I think Dr. Magdy explained it really well. And I agree with Dawn, in 5 minutes, it's not a lot of time to explain the complexity of what von Willebrand disease really is and the impacts. And we know the impacts are quite different. If you're a woman with von Willebrand disease, we know it's quite different than a man, and how it manifests is quite different. So really what we're trying to do is create a lot of awareness through the VWD Call to Action about what VWD is and how can we try to improve care and treatment for these patients everywhere. So a lot of it is recognition, it's creating awareness, it's trying to break the stigma and the isolation that patients have felt worldwide. The WFH is responding to the needs of patients. It came to the WFH that patients were concerned. They wanted us to be able to do more about von Willebrand disease, and we really have responded to that need through the VWD Call to Action, as well as through our VWD Initiative program, listening to patients worldwide, giving a voice to these patients so that they feel empowered and able to be agents of change in their own communities. So we actually adopted the VWD Call to Action. This was done in 2018. It was unanimously adopted by our board of directors at that time. And since then, I'd like to say that we have had a ripple effect in so many different ways. We've been able to create change and increase awareness dramatically when it comes to von Willebrand disease. And this is to the efforts of so many people, so many of you working in your countries, really to integrate von Willebrand disease into the work you do. Next slide, please. So this is a pretty amazing, and since we've actually did the launch of this campaign, we've had 48 national member organizations sign on. This campaign really does target our member organizations and trying to get them to integrate VWD into the work they do. It's really exciting when you see this map. You see how it's being distributed currently all around the world. We have countries from all the different regions represented here. We have a magnitude of possibilities of what's being done in these countries around von Willebrand disease. And it really has dramatically increased. I would say the visibility of von Willebrand disease has really increased so much. I would say even 100% when I think about when I first started at the WFH, when we talked about VWD till now, there is so much more awareness about what VWD is. And the call to action is one action that we're doing. We know that it's a building, we're building on it. It's one step. There's much more we need to do, but this is really taking form and shape in a way that we could never have known the magnitude of what we're really doing. Countries are doing things all over. They're doing different types of actions. They're creating awareness in different ways, advocating. Clinical care and management is improving worldwide. We are seeing a lot of different increases and improvements. And a lot of that is really due to the type of awareness that's being done, this campaign that's really taking effect and shape. I often say that it's one pebble we throw in the ocean, but it's really all of our collective pebbles that make a difference. And that's what we're doing through the call to action. We really are creating milestones and really having recognition of VWD worldwide. So this is really segues into what the countries are doing. And it's really great that you're going to be able to see some of that today through this session. If you'd like more information, there'll be more about how you can sign on at the end that my colleague Alea will share with you. Thank you.
Wow, 48 NMOs. I hadn't heard the recent number. That's so exciting. Amazing work, and thank you all for joining that. Now that you know what the call to action is, you will get to hear from 4 different NMOs about how they have individually joined the call to action and prioritized von Willebrand disease in their efforts. So I will kick us off in sharing our experience in the United States. Next slide, please. So where did we start? So we actually started back in 2014 when we recognized that von Willebrand disease was absolutely under-recognized, under-educated, and we wanted to focus on this. So we hosted a von Willebrand disease summit to listen and understand the issues and challenges with diagnosing and treating VWD. We included patients and medical providers, researchers, our federal agency, pharmaceutical industry, payers, and NHF staff to discuss this. Next slide, please. So where did we go? We recognized that we really had to make a change. And so there was so much to do. Where do you start? Sometimes it can be overwhelming. But after the summit, there were systems put into place for the creation of the von Willebrand disease MASAC, which is our Medical and Science Advisory Council working group. But we also knew that in addition to those things you see on the screen, inclusive language and efforts were really needed. So our new logo was for all bleeding disorders. Our March Awareness Month, instead of Hemophilia Awareness Month, it was Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month. And then instead of the Hemophilia Walk, which is a fundraiser, it is now the Unite Walk. Next slide, please. We have a lot of resources, and so take a picture. I'm not going to read these all through because of time, but some really key things that came out of this was bilingual education in English and Spanish. So we have a lot of different printed brochures. We have videos. I want to call out the Better You Know webinar. So you can see up on the right-hand side of your screen, betteryouKnow.org is the website to go to, which is, so we created the website and the webinar was healthcare providers, but not in hemophilia. So we had 4,000 attendees in these non-hemophilia webinars for providers to educate them, and then also a risk assessment tool on our Better You Know website. Next slide, please. So again, a lot of print materials, welcome kits for families. We have things for adults, children, teens, for all. And really importantly, face-to-face programs that we developed to be delivered throughout our 53 chapters throughout the country, focused specifically on von Willebrand disease education. And then we also added a full von Willebrand disease track and a pre-con at our annual Bleeding Disorders Conference. Next slide, please. So one of the big things, we're so excited when WFH took this up and gave us a call to action. We said an enthusiastic yes, we want to be a part of this. And so we launched this last year with all of our chapters. And what you see our chapters people holding up into their hands, this is 52 chapters represented from across the United States, are sticky notes that they said, here are the things we will do to educate, to specifically focus on von Willebrand disease in the United States. Next slide, please. And then in reality, we also know that the chapters are also busy doing so many other things. So the official adoption of the call to action happened in 13 chapters, which you can see across the states, but we are continuing to encourage all of our 53 chapters to sign on to this action. Next slide, please. So this is our website. Please feel free to go there to get more information on the materials. You can download, they're all downloadable resources. NHF right now is working on our strategic plan for the next 10 years. And part of that vision is health equity and breaking down the barriers for all people with bleeding disorders. We promise that we will continue to pursue outreach efforts and create resources for men and women with VWD because we truly believe in treatment for all. So that is it for me. And next, I would like to introduce Chedia Aroua from Tunisia, and she's going to share her experience with VWD.
Hello everybody. Thank you for being here today for us. I would like first to introduce myself. My name is Chedia Aroua. I'm the General Secretary of the Tunisian Association of Hemophilia. Today, I would like to share with you Tunisia's experience with VWD. Next slide, please. So let's start with some statistics. As you can see here, we have diagnosed 225 people with von Willebrand disease. And it's a little bit less than 1% of our population, because normally we should have 1,200 persons diagnosed. So we are under the normal number. And we have 70% of people diagnosed as a VWD all over hemophilia patient and other bleeding disorder. Next slide. So our interest with VWD is we were interested from since 2017. The ATH vice president has been a very active young girl with VWD disease, Najiba Shayer. And she joined the global NMO training in the WFH World Congress in 2018 in Glasgow. And she joined the international VWD group, global group, and ATH signed the Global VWD Call to Action. Next slide. Some of our achievement is mainly the participation in the WFH VWD Global Group. As you know, this group aims to raise awareness and works to identify patients of VWD through all over the world through the experience of different countries participating in this project. Next slide. Some of our achievement also, we run many workshops, such as in 2019, to improve care and treatment for people with VWD in Tunisia. We make such workshop with the collaboration of many doctors from different specialties, such as hematologists, gynecologists, nurses, dentists, and many people with VWD and their families. So it was a very interesting workshop. Next slide. Another workshop specialized for nurses to improve the skills of nurses for the management of hemophilia in Tunisia. It was in 2018. We talked about von Willebrand disease to nurses, and we talk to women with bleeding disorder, and we make a case study for a person with VWD with an inhibitor. Next slide. Also to outreach and education, we talk to the general public about VWD via social media many times. We run many workshops dedicated to women with bleeding disorder. And finally, in 2020, we created a VWD WhatsApp group for question and answer for patients, families, and doctors with different specialties. Next slide. The main challenge and experience to share with you are increasing the number of patients diagnosed with VWD, create a specific national registry for patients with VWD, defend the right for prophylaxis also, and develop social activities specialized for VWD patients, and develop social media groups to educate and support patients with VWD. Thank you for your attention, and that's all.
Thank you so much, Chedia. That was excellent. I love to see how you not only did, the programs and outreach for your community, but also for your providers and that nurses training. That was excellent. Next up is Cassie Osejo from Panama. Cassie, take it away.
Hi, first I want to say thank you. Thank you for coming today and hearing a bit of what we have achieved in our organizations with the Global Call to Action. I'm Cassie Osejo from Panama. I'm a member of the Panamanian Hemophilia Foundation, and I'm going to show you some of the most important achievements and challenges that we have had in our country. Next one, please. So I want to start by talking a bit about what the Panamanian Hemophilia Foundation is. Panama is in Central America. It's a small country of 4 million people. There are 515 cases in the country with VWD. But today, all the people identified with the disease have a complete and free treatments in health institutions. Since 1980, our organization has kept a register of people with Willebrand disease, but we hadn't worked on specific programs for them. Next one, please. To start working with the Global Call to Action in Panama, we want to create a slogan with which people with VWD could feel identified. We create hashtag Yo Soy Von Willebrand, which means I am Von Willebrand in English, with the main goal of empowering people to feel more involved in issues about their disease and our organization. We also want to introduce VWD to the Panamanian population, providing them with all the necessary information about the disease, and in the same way we want that health entities to feel more involved and to take part in the activities of organization, and of course get more volunteers to help us. Next one, please. upgrade the database records for patients with VWD. With this program, the database registry was improved with the first stage of this program. And the Ministry of Panama was able to obtain a balance of medicine consumption for treatments of VWD to buy the necessary treatment so that the people can comply their treatments right now. Next one, please. So celebrating World Hemophilia Day in 2019, the Panamanian Hemophilia Foundation held the first national exclusive seminar about VWD that included the participation of teachers, doctors from different health centers, people with VWD and their families. We also did a discussion with the topic, how do you live on Willebrand disease? The main objective was to show what it is like to live with seen from 3 different generations. So how this influences their daily life and how this has changed over the years. This opened an opportunity to answer some questions that people had about the disease. Next one, please. Every year, we do a summer educational day for children for 6 to 12 years old with hemophilia, von Willebrand, and other disease, allowing them to interact with each other and learn more about their condition with dynamics activities. We started doing seminars for young men with hemophilia, von Willebrand, and other disorders. The main activities were to show young people the importance of the use of treatment, the importance of physical exercise, psychological activities, and of course, sex education. And for last, we are giving talks to patients and their family who are from the capital, where the central hospital is located, about their condition and home therapy course. Next one, please. On August 22nd, we opened our website and we have a section with all important information on von Willebrand. So you can access from the link that you see in this slide. And we also make 6 videos with information about the disease. These videos can be found on our Facebook, on Instagram page in Spanish. In the videos, we had a ratio of 25,000 production, so it's very grateful. Next one, please. Our challenge and solutions. Our first challenge was lack of information. We all know that there is still a lack of information on VWD. I think it's the one of the difficulties that all organizations have. So we're solving it, sharing information content like videos, stories, and sessions. And we have treatment accessibility. For the push of the treatment was focused only on hemophilia. So we had several meetings with government institutions to achieve the push of treatment for Willebrand. And last COVID-19, current situation have prevented the realization of many activities that we had scheduled for this year and that have had people exposed. But that doesn't stop us from taking advantage of all the means we have to try to bring all the necessary information about disease through virtual sessions. Next one, please. For last, I want to give you some tips. First, database. We're identify of people with VWD in your countries. That is important when you go to government entities and take some requests for help. Second, we have meetings, have meetings with these people to listen them so the organization knows what these people really need and do more activities about it. And use social media. Use social media to share more information about and share information in the didactic way that you can find attractive. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassie. Well, first, this is my favorite picture. I love this picture, and I appreciate you putting all of your social media, how we can reach you on the bottom, because the work you're doing just to be thinking about advocating for treatment and talking to your government, but knowing that you need the data and you need to be able to have the voices of the patients so that you can represent the needs and challenges, just outstanding. Thank you very much. So next slide, please. We are going to travel from Panama all the way over to South Africa. I'm very excited for our last and final NMO presentation this morning from Louise Ellwood. Louise, take it away.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Welcome and to a beautiful sunny South Africa. I'm Louise Ellwood and I would love to share with you the South African response to the Global VWD Call to Action. Next slide, please. So South Africa is a multi-ethnic society of approximately 60 million people, of which roughly 1/3 live in rural communities. We're defined as an upper middle income economy with a gross national income per capita of just over $6,000 US, which you compare to the USA, which is 10 times greater. Next slide. Okay, so why am I here today? I was born in Manchester in the UK and I moved out to South Africa in 1990. We have 3 sons, all in their 20s and grown up now, but the 2 youngest have type 3 von Willebrand's, which was diagnosed at an early age. You can probably recognize photographs of yourself if you have VWD with all the bumps and bruises and whatever, but they're very strong and healthy today. So I joined the Central Region South African Hemophilia Foundation Committee based in Johannesburg. And one of my duties there is I produce and prepare the quarterly newsletter. I became the VWD ambassador after the foundation joined the call to action in Glasgow in 2018. Next slide, please. Okay, so in South Africa, we have approximately 21% of all bleeding disorder patients have VWD, which are diagnosed in our major centers. And the current treatment is DDAVP, factor concentrate, tranexamic acid, and oral contraceptives for our female patients. Next slide. Okay, so to spread awareness and to start a conversation, we started a Facebook group and an Instagram page. We also have a WhatsApp group, which is a great way of giving information, saying about meetings, and just generally sharing what's going on in our community. And this year, for World Hemophilia Day 2020, we ran a series of infographics on VWD. They were very simple and were there just to sort of dispel some myths about bleeding disorders and particularly VWD. They were very basic and I think they were very well received. Next slide. Also, for this year's World Hemophilia Day, we encouraged our community to post pictures of themselves wearing red masks, red ties, and to post on our social platforms under the hashtags Get Involved and Red Tie Challenge. This was a great way of connecting not only in South Africa, but with the rest of the global bleeding disorders community. Next slide, please. So when COVID hit our shores earlier this year, the foundation recognized the need to digitize. So since February, we've been holding virtual meetings using social media, and we're busy developing an educational series called In Discussion With, which will feature sessions on VWD. And then also our Medical and Scientific Advisory Council will meet in November virtually this year. And for the first time, we're going to hold a one-day lay session, which will be open to our community, not just in South Africa, but other African countries as well. We also recognized that we needed to ensure we had plenty of personal protective equipment. So the foundation had an initiative to design and make their own PPE. This was an in-house design from materials we had at hand and designed for comfort and distributed to all our clinics and to the patients. Next slide. So what are the challenges that we face in South Africa? Firstly, there's a lack of VWD awareness and early diagnosis in our rural areas. These patients have limited access to our clinics and therefore treatment. And since the beginning of the year, we've seen a delay in some of our routine surgeries. Home therapy has been hindered by access to electricity. If you live in an informal settlement, there is no electricity, often no running water. So to maintain a sterile environment is very difficult. We also have limited disability benefits provided by the states, which just cover basic needs. Also, in some cultures, bleeding disorders are stigmatized, and fertility is seen as a strength, and menstrual hygiene is problematic for women who don't have access to sanitary products. Also, we face the challenge of deaths and complications arising from male circumcision during initiation ceremonies. So if you have a bleeding disorder, this is just confounded. Next slide. So what can we do moving forward? In South Africa, we've provided transport for clinic visits. And for those that can't attend clinic, our outreach nurses have been delivering factor and medication. We have also identified families in need at this time, and we've put together food parcels which can feed a family of 4 for up to a month. The foundation also supports a group for women with VWD and has produced leaflets and a poster aimed at women with bleeding disorders. And also we're advocating for continued free treatment through our state infrastructure. Next slide. So as NMOs, what can you do moving forward? So from personal experience, I would just like to say it takes small steps and the momentum has to be built from there. So start a support group, start social media pages, start a conversation. Also adopt the new VWD guidelines, which will be out shortly, and include bleeding disorders education at your state and community level. Also, awareness and diagnosis should be prioritized. And then for everybody listening today, for those of you that have signed on, that's fantastic, but please encourage neighboring countries, NMOs that you have contact with to join the Global VWD Call to Action. Because I just want you to remember that the more we share and learn from one another, together we can be stronger. Thank you very much.
Oh, Louise, that was absolutely the perfect final slide that you just took the words right out of my mouth. It's just, I think back to what Luisa said earlier about solidarity. That's absolutely what you're talking about. And I feel your passion for this. I love the work that you have done there, and talk about solidarity with food parcels. You're thinking beyond, right? What sort of many of us think about is diagnosis, treatment, but what else is needed? So thank you so much for your presentation. It's just the perfect way to send us to the next slide. In our breakout groups. So we have the opportunity now to break into 5 different groups. A reminder, you will actually be broken into English, French, Spanish, Russian, and Arabic breakout groups. And you can see here the moderators, Luisa, Alia, Luis, Cassie, Nicola, Charlene, Baiba, and Chedia. Thank you all for being the leads in those breakout groups. And at any time, you can click the Ask for Help button. But please, when you go into the breakout group, please mute your microphone and wait for the moderator to begin the session. And please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. As you all know, I think now we've all had an opportunity to live in this virtual world of meetings, and it can get really noisy and then you can't hear the people speaking. So thank you, and please enjoy this opportunity. We're going to have about 15 to 20 minutes. I think this is your opportunity to share what you're thinking about doing, what you've done, maybe some of the challenges you've had, and to ask questions, and that together we can help problem solve. This is really where community comes into place. So let's get together, enjoy this opportunity of brainstorming, and we'll return in about 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you, everyone. That was great. I know in our discussion group, that was wonderful. So now we are going into the Q&A question period. And so this is your opportunity to please use the chat. In fact, let me see, do we have yeah, please go to the next slide. Yay, I don't have to do this by memory. That's amazing. So please use the chat to type your question. Indicate if your question is directed to one of the speakers in particular. Keep your question brief. Obviously, you know, it's hard to type anyway, so we'll try to answer as many as possible. But your questions may be typed in English, French, Spanish, Arabic, or Russian. And I'm going to kick it off because we did have a medical question. Is Dr. Magdy still on?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Wonderful, thank you. So this is for Dr. Magdy, and you're not going to be surprised, but I gave my very layman's answer to it, but this really is a question for you. For type 3 VWD, the patient is being recommended that they use desmopressin, and that was questioned, and rightly so. What is your thought about that?
In general, as the use of desmopressin, normally it is recommended for type 1.
Right.
And even with type 1, at many times it is recommended to do a therapeutic efficacy test because it does not work with every one with type 1. For type 3, this is complete deficiency. So yeah. What is desmopressin is doing is that in type 1, we have small amount of von Willebrand, but and some of them, it is stored in our blood vessels. When we have the desmopressin, this helps to release this small amount that's stored in our blood vessel, so it can help. In type 3, there is no factor from the start, so there is no stores, so it will not work.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I gave the right answer. I was like, I'm not a doctor, but this is what I think. Other questions from our moderators. Did you have questions that came up that you'd like to share with us? And also please chat, put in your questions in the chat.
I think one of the things that came up, which was interesting, was how do you break the stigma? How do you try to work on that in terms of trying to break the isolation that patients might feel? And how do you work on trying to break the stigma that patients often experience in terms of von Willebrand disease? And it came out to more than once within our breakout group, that question of how do you try to work on that in different ways and what's possible. So there were some interesting ideas. Nigeria had an interesting idea about having an ambassador for VWD to talk about VWD. So it's something that I think is important to share with everyone. The more we talk about it, Louise mentioned this, the more we talk about it, the more we share about von Willebrand disease, then the more normal it becomes actually talking about it. So this is where we're trying to normalize the discussion and the discourse around von Willebrand disease.
Thank you, Luisa. I know, I think probably our speakers will definitely be able to comment on that, what they've been able to do. In the United States, actually, the ambassador idea is such a good idea. We have Better You Know advocates, which is exactly what that is an ambassador. So there are, I can't remember how many, like 8 advocates that know all about that. So they can be out in the community really advocating and talking. Chedia, Cassie, Louise, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about how to break the stigma and really the aloneness?
Yes, I also think, sorry, it's Louise here. I also think it's just through education. Education is the most important thing. And then in South Africa also, I was appointed as the ambassador advocate for VWD. So I think that is the way forward, education and awareness. In South Africa, we have many cultures, many different beliefs. We're not going to quell all the all the myths that are surrounding bleeding disorders, but through education, at least people are informed, and then they can make an informed decision after that.
Excellent, thank you. Cassie?
I think that the most important thing that, like says, is the education, and as an organization, we must provide all the necessary information to the people, clarify all jobs that they have. So that's very important. Education.
Chedia, how did you break through that stigma for your NMO?
On my point of view, I think that we have to encourage people to discuss more about von Willebrand disease through a workshop. We should invite them to join us closely to talk more and more about this disease. And why not invite doctors for many specialties such as gynecologists, as we did with the collaboration of the World Federation of Hemophilia in the GAP program, to discuss the main issue of this disease related to female with their periods and so on. And then cut this stigma issue between patients and doctors, and talk more and more about this disease. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. So I know we are just right at time. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to move to the next slide, but thank you for your questions in the chat. And we'll make sure that we address those at a later time. Can we get to the next slide, please? So I'm turning it over. I saw so many questions about how do I join? What does our NMO need to do? So this is the perfect segue to Aaliyah. Can you tell us how we can all get involved?
Hi all, absolutely. Next slide, please. So my name is Aaliyah Loney. I'm a program coordinator at the WFH. It's my pleasure today to get to talk to you, albeit briefly, about the Global VWD Call to Action. So the first thing I want to say is I hope today's webinar has given you some tools and ideas to begin or continue the invaluable work that many of you are doing on VWD across the globe. For those who have already signed on to the Global VWD Call to Action, I hope you feel a renewed commitment to the call, and that the actions that you're already taking and the work you're already doing feels exciting and inspirational again. For those who have not yet signed on, I hope today's webinar provided the inspiration for you to join your fellow WFH NMOs in uniting to raise awareness and improve the lives of those living with VWD. If you would like to sign on, please find the detailed instructions here on the left-hand side of this slide. If you have any questions or you need support at any time, please simply contact us at vwd@wfh.org. So there are some steps in order to sign on to the call to action. Speak with your board, speak with your NMO, see what can be done, see what you have capacity to do, and then take the step to call on or to sign on. If at any time you have questions, please contact us. That's what we're here for. We're happy to help. I want to close by saying the WFH's vision is treatment for all. So the Global VWD Call to Action has the potential to increase diagnosis and improve care. In fact, it already has, for those living with VWD across the globe, no matter where they live. It is our hope that you will sign on to the Global VWD Call to Action and help us make treatment for all a reality. So thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you all for joining us. I can't wait to see the next steps of what you will do with your NMO. Thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you to the WFH team. We're all in this together. So it is with every single person that will hit treatment for all. So thank you for your participation. You will be emailed a short survey after the webinar. Please fill it out because it gives us great input about how we can improve and different topics. So thanks everybody. Have a wonderful evening or morning or day. Bye-bye.
Ciao.